Hey guys, welcome to the Choke Points. And in this video, we are going to talk about America's Africa policy. And why is that? Because in the national security document, national security strategy document that the US has released just 2 or 3 days ago, in that document, Africa has been talked about in detail. And first of all, let's look at what exactly it is, and then we are going to get much more deeper into it because most of it, once again, like most of it that's there in the document, I've already mentioned these things in the past in my wherever I have talked about these things. Okay, and very clearly, like I had said, that Africa will become the center stage, and Africa is going to be the battlefield for everything. Countries are going to invest in Africa primarily for many reasons, right? And it's not going to be all that about aid or financial aid or regime changes or any such thing. It will be all about investment, business, trade, all those things. Okay. So let's look at the policy first, and then we are going to dive deep into it. Okay. So let's see what exactly it is, and then. So here it is. And this is the document. So what it says is that for too long, American policy in Africa has focused on providing and later on spreading liberal ideology. Okay. The United States should instead look to partner with selected countries to ameliorate the conflict, foster mutually beneficial trade relationships, and transition from foreign aid paradigm to an investment and growth paradigm capable of harnessing Africa's abundant natural resources and latent economic potential. Opportunities for engagement could include negotiating settlements to ongoing conflicts, for example, DRC, Rwanda, Sudan, and preventing new ones, for example, Ethiopia, Eritrea, and Somalia, as well as action to amend our approach to aid and investment, for example, the Africa Growth and Opportunity Act, AGOA, basically. And we must remain wary of resurgent Islamic terrorist activity in parts of Africa while avoiding any long-term American presence or commitments. What does all this really mean? We will talk about all that in in the detail. All right, guys. So stay with me till the end because this is not gonna be very long for podcast. But this is going to be an interesting one because this is going to give you the view of how the world is changing around us. All right. The United States should transition from an aid focused relationship with Africa to a trade and investment focused relationship, favoring partnerships with capable, reliable states committed to opening their markets to US goods and services. So, look at this right here. The United States should transition from an aid focused relationship with Africa to a trade and investment focused relationship favoring partnerships with capable, reliable states committed to opening their markets to US goods and services. An immediate area of US investment in Africa with prospects for good return on investment, including the energy sector and critical mineral development. Then development of US backed nuclear energy, liquid petroleum gas, and liquefied natural gas technologies can generate profits for US businesses and help us in the competition for critical minerals and other resources. Now, just few days ago, when I made a video about Africa, I said one thing. Okay, I said one thing very clearly, and that thing was that France made a very big mistake when French were there. Then instead of what they did is that they just mined the uranium from there, but they never really thought about setting up a nuclear power plant over there. And I think that's the mistake that France made, and France is gone from African continent altogether. So this is what President Trump is saying, that in this policy, what he's saying is that the development should be mutually beneficial. Why are we investing in China or any other country? And then eventually what happens is that when they become financially stronger, then they become our rival, or in some cases they become so-called hostile. All right. But what he's saying is that if we take this Africa policy, then African countries are not that big and they're not too small. There is a great economic potential because of the natural resources and the young population. Okay. So what he's saying is that if we invest over there in Africa, then down the line, if they let's say these countries become economic developed and all, then it's not like they're gonna become like China and become our rivals or enemies or something. Okay. So that's what basically he's saying, and that's the actually scope of this whole entire thing. But what exactly uh is going on, right? See, what happened is this: for a long time, okay, for a long time, America's policy in Africa was basically driven by certain ideas. For example, spreading democracy, liberal values, and political systems, all right? And which is something, a template that the rule based international order has always tried to implement all around the globe. And the same rule based order was established in Europe, and today look what happened to the Europe is not even a proper democracy. They When they see that opposition party is actually losing or winning, sorry, then they just simply put them in jail or something. Look at what happened in America itself, right? You don't have to go too far, right? Apple doesn't fall, it doesn't fall far from the tree. So that's it. Look at here. So so this whole belief, right, belief was that if countries basically became more democratic, and then what's going to happen is that's going to bring them stability, prosperity, and everything else will follow. Or at least that was the narrative that was fed to people. Okay. But in reality, what exactly the Western system wanted, or say Western deep state wanted, was and then certain presidents that came, certain governments that came, they actually worked with the deep state to implement certain things. And what they wanted was that, what they were saying is that when you implement the system that you understand, okay, when you implement a system that you understand, then it's easy to manipulate that system. What does that mean? Meaning that if American deep state or America does not understand, or American government does not understand a democratic or election process in a country, then how they're going to organize a regime change when they want to. So that's why they were like, okay, let's implement a template and impose that template, try, or at least try to impose that template everywhere and see how that works. Look at Afghanistan, that template did not work. Iraq, that template did not work. Libya is still a, you know, hellhole. Then Syria, they're trying the same template in Syria, but no, that's not gonna work. Simply because the reason being that certain section or certain group of people, they just cannot be, they don't believe in this whole democratic process. Some certain group of people, they like whips and canes. Okay. You have to rule them. All right. You cannot uh, you cannot go and tell them that government for the people, by the people, and of the people. No, they just want to be ruled. So you have to give it to them. All right. And this approach, so what, like I said, this approach basically has not produced any results in the Washington as they were expecting. Okay. So, for example, like if you say, many regions are basically what? Many regions are still unstable. Conflicts are there. Conflicts still continue. Majority of the conflicts, there are like almost 40 plus conflicts that are going on right now all over the globe. And lots of them are in Africa. And then there are conflicts, major ones we already know. All right. So then there are terror groups that are active in parts of Africa, and most importantly, what that is, yes, US economic influence has fallen behind China, Russia, and India, even other regional powers too. So because of this, the US policy makers are basically openly they are admitting that yes, this policy has failed, and Africa policy based on ideology is not going to work. Now, see, this is I don't believe that this was really an ideology thing. This was more of a selfishness thing that hey, the whole enslavement policy, the ideology was that enslavement ideology that yeah, let's go, just take the suck the blood out of Africa and suck their blood completely, hang them to dry, and then take everything and get out. That's what the whole thing was. All right. So, so instead of trying to reshape the societies politically, the US now wants to uh, deal with Africa based on what was given in the policy document that I just read, right? Trade, investment, energy, resources, strategic competition, right? All these things, partnership, right? So, and this was going to happen. Why? Because uh, there is a reason for it too. The reason being that first of all, if you look at China's population is aging, right? It's already 40 some. Then America's population is aging too. Same thing. By 2050, America, China, Japan, their average population will be almost 45, 46 years old. Okay. They won't be able to uh, do much of industrial output, which we call, right? Industrial output, they won't be able to produce that much industrial output. Now, because industrial output will decline, so what that means? It means that technically, the result of the decline in the output is that economy will go downhill. And when you have a less military age population, then your military is not very strong either, right? So all these things are gonna happen. So to avoid that, first of all, America's primary need is exports. They cannot tariff forever, and also they need to get competitive. It's time to get competitive. How you do it, you have to figure that out. And what they need is they need exports. Now, when you tariff China, Russia, India, and all that, then you cannot expect to export their product over there, whatever you manufacture, right? So what do? You find alternatives to it. How do you find that alternatives? You find the best candidate to give your technology, send your companies there so that they can start manufacturing and all, and then export from there locally because it's going to be cheaper for you. Because other countries, those countries, African countries, their products actually most of these products are subsidized. Okay, so since they are subsidized and all in other countries, so it's going to be very cheaper. Okay, so that's the idea behind it. This is why there is a for this fundamental shift is there, that Africa is no longer viewed as a humanitarian or a democracy project. Okay, it is now viewed as a strategic economic battlefield. All right, this was going to happen. All right, the way the way other great powers are getting involved with Africa. And so for US, actually, I think is slightly late in this process. Okay, the BRI has pretty much taken over Africa, so to replacing BRI will be the hardest thing. And uh, I'm not saying it cannot be done. It can be done, but it has to be done faster. All right. The second thing that was mentioned in the document was the from foreign aid to business and investment, right? So one of the biggest change in the new policy is the move away from foreign aid. Now, foreign aid always has been uh, uh, more so of a no ROI. Foreign aids are always no ROI. Now, In the past, foreign aids were given to the countries that were that to use them for to have some leverage over them. Okay, leverage, why? Meaning that, let's say, country is strategically important, so what do? You give them foreign aid, you feed their corrupt leaders so that they listen to you when you ask them to do something. Okay, that was the whole concept behind the foreign aid. Now, foreign aid was like, fentanyl, that you give that drug and then nobody wants to get out of it. And then we also saw USAID. What happened with USAID? The corruption, right? So all those things were not helping America in any way. And the countries that get foreign aid, it doesn't help them either, except for few people who actually benefit from it. Why? Because foreign aid is not taxed, so they just uh, eat all that money, and money disappears. Okay, and it never goes to the people who need it. So for decades, what happened is that Africa was approached mainly through what? Aid programs, development grants, like I said earlier, right? The poverty relief funding. And then also there were conversion factories too who would go there, and their primary goal was to kill Africa's uh, the native culture, native language, and then their own native religion, right? And in fact, because if you go there and you talk to lots of African, for example, I've talked to many, and like from people from Senegal and all, they don't know what their actual language is. They say that their official language is French. And so I asked the guy, "Hey, you don't sound like French to me." so he didn't know what to say, because he was and he but he did say that yes, his official language after French occupation, it became all that. But anyways, so, but now President Trump's administration is taking a different approach. And what they're saying is that they want to replace aid with private investment, infrastructure projects, energy development, and then trade driven growth, meaning that, hey, we invest over here and you grow, and in return, it benefits us too, and we grow together. Okay. So, and this is going to happen only when you are helping the countries in stabilizing their governments. Because um, once again, I've said this thing in the past and I'm saying it again, that political sovereignty and political stability leads to economic sovereignty and economic stability. Okay, you have to have that. Without this, you're not gonna have either or. Actually, they both are, I would say, mutually dependent. All right. So you, first of all, what do? You do stable governments, then you work on having market friendly economies. You, with those governments, you go and talk to those governments, you ask them to do the economic reforms, so that companies can invest accordingly and do the trade, right? So that it's good for both parties, right? And then you got to look for countries that are open for US markets and all that. US companies, they're going to open their markets for US companies. So one of those countries I would say is Kenya. Kenya is very open to this. Okay. Then other country I can think of is Nigeria too. Then South Africa, to an extent, South Africa, but Angola is there too. Angola is there. DRC is there. So you will see lots of these countries. In fact, Ethiopia won't mind that, but Ethiopia is primarily a Chinese hub, so they may not. And Ethiopia is part of BRICS as well, so that could get tricky. But I think that at this point, US may actually focus on stabilizing Libya as well. All right. Now, then another thing that is talked is the conflicts and terrorism, right? Stability via nation building, right? And so President Trump, you know how President Trump showed some of his interest in resolving the conflicts like Congo and Rwanda. Then you have Sudan civil war is going on. Then lots of Horn of Africa's instability is there, right? And like I said earlier, that the goal is to stabilize these governments so that they can develop their economies, and their economic development will be directly tied to the America's economic development too. Now, why? Because when you export, when you these countries will adopt, when these countries will open their markets for American companies, then what's going to happen is that it will stabilize the dollar as well. Okay, and why is that? Because see, lots of African countries have this problem, and I've explained this in my previous videos, but I will explain again. The the most dangerous thing that will hurt dollar is not going to be de-dollarization. The most dangerous thing that's going to hurt dollar is the trade in national currencies. And most of the countries in Africa, they are trading in their national currencies. They have their own pan-African currency market and all, so they can do their own currency exchange and all that too. Now, since they can do all that stuff, so what is the next step? Next step is very simple. Next step is for them to reach out to other Asian powers and all that. And what? Trade in national currencies. The moment they start to trade in national currencies, for them, dollar will become less important. I'm not saying that it's not going to be important or useful. They may use dollar as an alternative, but dollar will become less important as a result, right? So that's why, if you really want to stabilize everything, then you got to make move really, really fast. All right. Now, if you want to do that, then what can you do? See, there are certain natural resources in African continent that are completely untouched and that require American technology and American help. And one of those things would be, I would say for example, critical minerals, then oil and gas. Now, for oil and gas, I'll give you an example. For example, oil and gas, Nigeria. There was a time before 2012. What Nigeria used to do is that Nigeria used to uh, drill the crude oil. It would export the crude oil and then it would buy the refined oil. Okay, gasoline, then petrol, diesel, all these things. It would import it. Why? Because Nigeria didn't have any uh, refineries. But after Dalgote, they opened two refineries over there. Then Nigeria actually stopped all that. Okay, so and that's the kind of thing. Like, instead of exporting the raw material, uh, when U.S. companies will actually help African countries in actually developing all those things locally and then exporting it, then it's gonna change the scenario. Okay, and when all these countries, they become economically independent, then they are not going to rely on any power for that matter to really survive or to do anything. Because once these countries, they become economically sovereign and politically sovereign, right, then they will make their own decisions, right? Today, nobody goes and tells Saudi Arabia what to do. Otherwise, if it just before 1938, Saudi Arabia was nothing. There was nothing over there, right? Look at Qatar, look at UAE, all these Middle Eastern countries in the West Asia and all that. Their situation was pretty bad. But after that, it's just now they do is they show their supercars all over the place. So the minerals and all that, the minerals that we're talking about, the critical minerals, oil and gas, liquefied natural gas, then we have nuclear linked energy infrastructure, right? All this is gonna what does it do? Electric vehicles, military hardware, AI systems, power grids, semiconductor supply chains, all that will come from Africa. Okay, so what the US wants to do is the US wants to invest in African energy production, and then uh, the nuclear power plants, then LNG projects, then AI, then all these things, right? And then also, if you notice, the Africa is very big on crypto. Okay, Africa is very big on crypto, so you will see that US may invest more in Africa in crypto too. Okay, so so this is why right now the whole idea is to really move faster and uh, smarter. Because if you don't do it right now, Make no mistake, there are people, there are countries that are right now that have their policy in place already, what to do and what not to do down the line. Okay. So this is a good change. This is why I was saying in my last video, I said that for the first time it seems like there is a sensible policy that has been implemented, something uh, that has some strategy to it, something that has that is actionable, right? So let's see what happens. And I think that future of Africa, regardless of whether US invest there or not, future of Africa is going to be bright. All right. Nobody can change that and nobody can deny that. All right. So please do like and subscribe, guys. I hope you learned something. And I will talk to you guys in another video. Take care.